Captain Sarah Chen stared at the radar screen in disbelief. The objects approaching Earth were massive, each one the size of a small moon. They moved in perfect formation, their surfaces gleaming like polished crystal under the light of distant stars. "Ma'am, we're getting energy readings unlike anything we've ever seen," reported Lieutenant Martinez from his station. "These ships? They're not using any propulsion system, we understand." Sarah gripped the armrest of her command chair. As the leader of Earth's orbital defense force, she had trained for this moment her entire career. First contact with alien life, but nothing in the simulations had prepared her for ships this enormous. "Open a channel," she ordered. "All frequencies." The communication officer worked frantically at his console. "Channel open, Captain." Sarah took a deep breath. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. Welcome to our solar system. We come in peace and hope to establish friendly relations." Silence filled the bridge. The alien ships continued their approach, growing larger on the view screen with each passing second. Sarah could see details now. The ships were not built but grown. They looked like living crystal formations, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Then the screen flickered. A face appeared that made several crew members gasp. The being was tall and thin, its skin appearing to be made of liquid metal that shifted and flowed. Where eyes should have been, there were 2 points of brilliant blue light. When it spoke, its voice was like wind chimes in a storm. "Primitive creatures," the being said, its words somehow translated perfectly into English. "We are the Zephyrian Empire. Your world will serve us now." "I'm sorry, but I don't understand," Sarah replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "We'd like to discuss—" The alien's image vanished. On the view screen, one of the crystal ships began to glow. A beam of light shot out, striking the defense station orbiting Mars. The entire structure simply disappeared, as if it had never existed. "My God," whispered Martinez. Sarah's training kicked in. "All ships, battle formation. Prepare weapons." The Earth fleet spread out, their nuclear missiles and plasma cannons charging. It was humanity's most advanced military technology, the pride of 3 generations of space engineers. The aliens destroyed it all in less than 5 minutes. Sarah watched in horror as ship after ship vanished under the alien weapons. The beams didn't explode their targets or burn them. They simply erased them from existence, leaving nothing but empty space where proud vessels had been moments before. "Captain," the communications officer shouted, "the aliens are transmitting to Earth directly." On Earth's surface, every television, radio, and computer screen displayed the same image. The metal-skinned alien appeared in homes, offices, and schools across the planet. Billions of people stopped what they were doing to listen. "People of Earth," the Zephyrian announced, "I am Commander Valix of the 5th Fleet. Your species will now serve the Zephyrian Empire. Resistance is meaningless. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your technology is primitive. You will work for us, and in return, we will allow you to live." The alien's image changed, showing massive cities on distant worlds. In those cities, creatures of dozens of different species labored under the watchful eyes of Zephyrian overseers. Some looked like giant insects, others resembled walking trees. All wore the same expression of defeated exhaustion. "These beings once thought as you do," Valix continued. "They believed they could fight us. Now they serve us willingly, grateful for the order we have brought to their chaotic lives. You will learn the same lesson." The transmission ended. Sarah stared at her remaining ships on the tactical display. Out of 200 vessels, only 12 survived. The alien fleet hadn't even slowed down. "Captain," her communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving a message from Earth Command." "Put it through." President Morrison appeared on the screen, her face pale but determined. Sarah, fall back to Earth immediately. "We're calling an emergency session of the United Nations." "Ma'am, with respect, we should keep fighting." "Maybe if we—" "With what?" Morrison interrupted. "Sarah, they destroyed our entire outer defense grid in minutes. They're not even trying hard. Come home." The next 3 days were chaos on Earth. Some governments wanted to fight to the last person. Others argued for immediate surrender. Riots broke out in major cities as people demanded answers their leaders couldn't provide. The Zephyrians waited patiently in orbit. They made no demands, issued no ultimatums. They simply watched as humanity tore itself apart with fear and uncertainty. On the 4th day, they demonstrated their power again. The city of Mumbai had declared itself a free zone, and its leaders announced they would never bow to alien masters. Commander Valix's response was swift and precise. A single beam from one of the crystal ships carved a perfect circle around the city's center. Every building, every street, every living thing within that circle simply ceased to exist. But the surrounding areas remained untouched. Not even a window was broken in the buildings just outside the circle. The message was clear. The Zephyrians could destroy anything they wanted with perfect precision. Resistance would only lead to more demonstrations. President Morrison called Sarah to her office that evening. The president looked like she had aged 10 years in 4 days. "They're asking for a meeting," Morrison said. "The aliens want to discuss terms." "Terms for what?" "Surrender." The meeting took place in the ruins of Geneva. The Zephyrians had chosen the location deliberately, landing their shuttle in the exact spot where the old United Nations building had once stood. Commander Valix emerged from his ship surrounded by 6 other Zephyrians. They were all tall and graceful, their metal skin reflecting the afternoon sunlight. Sarah noticed they didn't wear any visible weapons or armor. They didn't need to. The world's remaining leaders had gathered for this moment. Presidents, prime ministers, kings, and queens sat at a simple table that looked absurdly small next to the towering aliens. Valix spoke without emotion. "You will sign the subjugation accords. Your species will be relocated to various worlds within our empire to provide labor and services. Your technology will be confiscated. Your weapons will be destroyed. Your education systems will be shut down. Children born after today will be raised in our facilities to serve us better." "And if we refuse?" asked the Secretary General of the United Nations. Valix gestured casually toward the sky. "We will demonstrate our power on larger targets until you comply. We estimate that destroying 10 major cities will convince you. We are prepared to destroy 100 if necessary." Sarah watched the faces around the table. These were the most powerful people on Earth, and they all wore the same expression of helpless defeat. President Morrison was the first to reach for the pen. "Where do I sign?" One by one, every leader added their signature to the document. When it was done, Valix collected the papers without ceremony. "Transport ships will arrive tomorrow," he announced. "Prepare your populations for relocation. Welcome to the Zephyrian Empire." As the aliens returned to their shuttle, Sarah felt something break inside her chest. Humanity had lasted millions of years, survived ice ages, plagues, and wars. Now, in the span of a week, they had become slaves to creatures who saw them as barely more than animals. But as she watched the crystal ships hanging in Earth's sky like beautiful, terrible stars, Sarah Chen made herself a promise. Somehow, someday, humanity would be free again. She just had to figure out how to fight gods. Dr. Marcus Webb wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished repairing the atmospheric processor. The machine hummed back to life, pumping breathable air into the mining tunnels below. 3 years ago, he had been developing advanced weapon systems for the military. Now he fixed air conditioners for alien overlords. The neural compliance chip behind his ear gave a small pulse, reminding him that his work shift wasn't over yet. The device had been implanted in every human after the occupation began. It monitored their thoughts, emotions, and actions. Step out of line, and the chip delivered pain that could drop a grown man to his knees. Marcus had learned to keep his thoughts carefully neutral when Zephyrians were around. The aliens could read the chip's data at any time, and suspicious thought patterns led to adjustment sessions that no one ever talked about afterward. "Human Marcus," a voice called behind him. Marcus turned to see Overseer Thex approaching. The Zephyrian's metal skin shifted from silver to a warning shade of orange, indicating mild displeasure. "Yes, Overseer," Marcus replied, keeping his voice respectful. "The processors in Section 7 are failing again. You will repair them before the night cycle ends." Marcus nodded. Section 7 was a 4-hour walk through dangerous mining tunnels. The Zephyrians had chosen this mining world, Keth 7, because its atmosphere was toxic to most species. Only humans seemed able to work in the sulfur-rich environment for extended periods. As Thex glided away on his anti-gravity platform, Marcus allowed himself a moment of carefully controlled anger. The Zephyrians had separated him from his daughter Elena during the initial relocations. He hadn't seen her in 3 years and didn't even know if she was still alive. Meanwhile, hundreds of light years away, Elena Webb was very much alive and equally angry. She worked in the communications hub of the massive Zephyrian command ship Dominance, monitoring radio signals from across their empire. Her job was simple: listen to alien chatter and flag anything that might indicate rebellion among the slave species. Elena had become very good at her job. Too good, perhaps. The Zephyrians had begun to trust her with increasingly sensitive communications. They spoke freely in front of her, discussing military movements, resource allocations, and strategic plans. To them, she was just another piece of equipment, no more capable of understanding their conversations than a computer terminal. They couldn't have been more wrong. Elena had always been gifted with languages. Before the invasion, she had been studying xenolinguistics at university, dreaming of the day humanity might encounter alien life. The irony wasn't lost on her now. Over the months, she had learned to understand Zephyrian without the automatic translators they provided for their human workers. She discovered that their language was incredibly complex, with subtle variations in tone and frequency that conveyed layers of meaning. But it also revealed something important. The Zephyrians had weaknesses. During a particularly long shift, Elena overheard a conversation between two Zephyrian fleet commanders that made her heart race. They were discussing problems with their power distribution network. Apparently, their technology was so interconnected that a failure in one system could cascade through their entire fleet. "The Council grows impatient," one commander said in perfect Zephyrian. "The power fluctuations in the 7th sector are becoming more frequent." "It is the price of our advancement," replied the other. "Our ships share consciousness as we do. When one suffers, all feel the pain." Elena forced herself to keep working, sorting through radio transmissions as if she hadn't understood a word. But her mind was racing. Shared consciousness. Interconnected systems. What the Zephyrians saw as their greatest strength might also be their greatest weakness. That night, in her small sleeping quarters, Elena began to plan. She couldn't contact her father directly, but she could try to reach other humans. The Zephyrians monitored all official communication channels, but they had overlooked something important: the very networks they used to coordinate their empire. Elena had noticed that maintenance signals and routine data transfers weren't closely watched. If she could hide a message in the normal flow of information, it might reach other human workers without triggering the monitoring systems. It took her weeks to develop the code. She embedded messages in diagnostic reports, hiding human words in the technical data streams that flowed between Zephyrian facilities. The first message was simple: Elena Webb, Communications Hub Dominance. "Anyone out there?" The response came 3 days later, hidden in a power consumption report from Keth 7. "Marcus Webb, Atmospheric Systems." "My daughter?" "You're alive," Elena cried for the first time in months. But her tears were quickly replaced by determination. If she could reach her father, she could reach others. Over the following weeks, Elena's hidden network grew. James Rodriguez, a former military officer working in a Zephyrian weapons facility, joined their communications. Dr. Sarah Kim, a scientist enslaved on an agricultural world, added her expertise. Slowly, carefully, they began to share information. The picture that emerged was troubling. The Zephyrian Empire was vast, controlling hundreds of worlds and dozens of species. But it was also rigid and predictable. Their military doctrine was based on overwhelming force and technological superiority. They had never learned to fight an enemy that used stealth and deception. Marcus contributed vital technical information about Zephyrian power systems. Their ships and installations all used the same basic energy matrix, connected through subspace networks that allowed for instant communication across impossible distances. But that same network that made them so powerful also made them vulnerable. "If we could overload one power core," Marcus sent in a hidden message, "the feedback might spread through their entire network." Rodriguez added tactical knowledge. "Their security is designed to stop direct assaults. They have no defense against sabotage. They can't imagine that primitive species would be capable of complex planning." But Elena's most important discovery came by accident. She was monitoring a routine communication when she heard two Zephyrian technicians discussing their translation systems. The devices that allowed humans to understand Zephyrian commands worked both ways, but they had a fatal flaw. The translators were connected to the same network that controlled the neural compliance chips. If someone could access the translation system, they might be able to affect the chips themselves, maybe even turn them off completely. Elena shared this discovery with her growing network of contacts. The response was immediate and unanimous. They had to try. The plan was dangerous. If the Zephyrians discovered what they were doing, The consequences would be severe. But as Elena sat in her quarters, reading messages from humans scattered across the galaxy, she realized they didn't have a choice. Her neural chip pulsed, warning her that her rest period was almost over. Soon she would return to her station, listening to alien conversations and pretending to be the obedient servant they believed her to be. But Elena Webb was no one's servant. She was a human being, and humans had something the Zephyrians couldn't understand: the refusal to accept defeat. As she prepared for another day of careful deception, Elena allowed herself to smile. The Zephyrians thought they had broken humanity's spirit. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The uprising was coming. They just didn't know it yet. James Rodriguez crouched behind a stack of energy cells in the Zephyrian weapons facility, his heart pounding so hard he was sure the aliens would hear it. In his hands he held a small device that Elena had designed and Marcus had helped him build. It looked like a standard maintenance scanner, but hidden inside its circuits was something that could change everything. For 6 months now, the human resistance network had grown from 3 people to nearly 200, spread across 17 different worlds. They communicated through Elena's hidden message system, sharing information and planning small acts of sabotage. But they had never attempted anything this big. The plan was Elena's idea. If they could plant her virus in the Zephyrian communication network, it would spread like a disease through their interconnected systems. But to do that, they needed access to a primary communication hub, and those were heavily guarded. Rodriguez had volunteered for the most dangerous part. As a maintenance worker in the weapons facility, he had access to communication arrays that other humans couldn't reach. The facility manufactured the beam weapons that had destroyed Earth's fleet, and Rodriguez had spent months learning how they worked. "Human James," a voice called out in the metallic tone of a Zephyrian overseer. "Why are you not at your assigned station?" Rodriguez stood up slowly, holding the disguised device casually at his side. "Scanner malfunction, Overseer Krell. I was checking the power couplings." The Zephyrian's skin shifted to a suspicious yellow color. Krell was smarter than most overseers, which made him dangerous. "Show me your work order." Rodriguez handed over the forged documentation that Elena had created. She had become an expert at mimicking Zephyrian administrative systems, and her fake orders were perfect. Krell examined the papers with his glowing blue eyes. "This section was inspected yesterday," Krell said slowly. "Yes, sir, but the power readings are still irregular. I thought it would be better to double-check than risk equipment failure." It was a good lie. The Zephyrians valued efficiency above all else, and they had punished supervisors who allowed equipment to fail due to poor maintenance. Krell considered this for a long moment, then nodded. "Complete your inspection quickly. The new shipment of human workers arrives tonight, and all systems must be operational." Rodriguez felt his blood turn cold. "New shipment?" "Children from the Proxima Station breeding facility. They will be processed for enhanced compliance and assigned to technical duties." Rodriguez managed to keep his expression neutral, but inside he was screaming. Enhanced compliance meant surgical modification of the brain to make humans more obedient. The children would be turned into living robots, capable of complex tasks but incapable of independent thought. Elena had warned them this was happening on other worlds. The Zephyrians had decided that the current generation of humans was too difficult to control. They were breeding a new generation that would be modified from birth to serve without question. After Krell left, Rodriguez waited 10 minutes, then moved quickly to the communication array. The device in his hand contained Elena's virus, compressed into a few lines of code that would hide in the network's routine data transfers. Once released, it would begin copying itself through every Zephyrian system it could reach. Rodriguez connected his scanner to the communication hub and began the upload. The process would take 5 minutes, an eternity when discovery meant death. He forced himself to work normally, checking power readings and adjusting settings as if nothing unusual was happening. 3 minutes in, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Rodriguez's heart stopped. Had they detected the virus? But then he heard Krell's voice over the intercom. "All units to the landing bay. Incoming transport requires immediate processing." The children had arrived early. Rodriguez watched through a window as a Zephyrian transport ship landed in the facility's main bay. The ship's cargo doors opened and small figures began filing out under heavy guard. Rodriguez had seen many terrible things during the occupation, But nothing had prepared him for this. The children were human, but barely. Their heads had been shaved and covered with neural interface ports. Their eyes were vacant, staring straight ahead without curiosity or fear. They moved in perfect synchronization like mechanical toys. These children had already been processed. They were being brought here for final assignment to work details. Rodriguez realized with growing horror that some of them couldn't be more than 8 years old. The virus upload completed, but Rodriguez couldn't make himself leave. He watched as the modified children were led to their new workstations, their small hands beginning to operate complex machinery with inhuman precision. Something broke inside Rodriguez's chest. All the careful planning, all the secret communications, all the patient waiting suddenly seemed meaningless. These children had been robbed of their humanity, and more would follow unless someone acted. Rodriguez activated his communicator, broadcasting on the emergency frequency that Elena had established for the resistance network. He knew the Zephyrians would detect the signal, but he didn't care anymore. This is James Rodriguez at Weapons Facility 7. They're processing children. 8-year-old kids turned into robots. I can't stand by and watch this happen. Across the galaxy, humans working in Zephyrian facilities heard his transmission. Elena, monitoring communications on the Dominance, watched as Zephyrian security forces began tracking the signal. Marcus, deep in the mines of Keth 7, stopped working and listened to his friend's voice crack with emotion. I'm going to try to get them out. Rodriguez continued. I know it's suicide, but someone has to try. Someone has to show these bastards that we're not animals to be experimented on. Rodriguez turned off the communicator and checked his weapon. During his months in the facility, he had secretly modified a plasma cutter to function as a crude rifle. It wouldn't do much damage to Zephyrian armor, but it might buy the children time to escape. He made his way to the processing center, where 30 modified children stood in perfect rows while technicians attached work assignments to their neural ports. Rodriguez burst through the doors, his makeshift weapon firing wild shots that scattered the technicians. Run, he shouted at the children. Get out of here! But the children didn't move. They couldn't. Their modified brains no longer understood concepts like freedom or escape. They simply stood there waiting for new orders. Rodriguez fought his way through the facility, destroying equipment and trying to reach the children. But he was one man against an army. Zephyrian guards surrounded him quickly, their beam weapons powered and ready. Surrender, human, Krell demanded. You will be processed for enhanced compliance as an example to others. Rodriguez looked at the vacant faces of the children, then at the aliens who had stolen their humanity. He smiled grimly and raised his weapon. Enhanced compliance this, he said, and fired. The beam weapons of the Zephyrians vaporized Rodriguez instantly, but his transmission had been heard across 17 worlds, and humans everywhere had seen the image of one man standing against impossible odds to protect children who couldn't protect themselves. Elena sat at her station on the Dominance, tears streaming down her face as she watched Zephyrian security reports flood in. Rodriguez was dead, but his sacrifice had accomplished something the Resistance had never managed before. For the first time in 3 years, humans across the galaxy were angry instead of afraid. Elena's virus was already spreading through the Zephyrian network, hidden in routine data transfers. Marcus had identified the critical weakness in their power systems, and now, thanks to Rodriguez's final stand, they had something that no successful rebellion could do without. They had a martyr, and martyrs had a way of inspiring revolution. Elena activated her communicator, broadcasting to every human in the Resistance network. James Rodriguez died protecting children who couldn't protect themselves. Tomorrow we make sure his death meant something. Tomorrow we show the Zephyrians what happens when you push humans too far. The spark had been lit. Now it was time to start the fire. Elena's hands moved across her console with practiced efficiency, but her mind was elsewhere. 3 days had passed since Rodriguez's sacrifice, and the Zephyrian communication networks were buzzing with reports of unusual behavior among human workers across the Empire. The virus she had planted was working perfectly, but not in the way she had expected. Instead of crashing systems immediately, it was doing something more subtle and far more dangerous. It was learning. Every time a Zephyrian accessed their network, Elena's virus copied a little more information: security codes, facility layouts, tactical data. even personal communications between commanders. The virus was building a complete picture of the Zephyrian Empire's weaknesses, and it was sharing that information with resistance cells across 17 worlds. Communications Officer Elena, Overseer Thane called from across the bridge. Report any unusual transmissions immediately. The Council suspects coordinated resistance activities. Yes, Overseer, Elena replied calmly. Inside, she was smiling. The Zephyrians had no idea that their most trusted human worker was the source of their problems. On Keth 7, Marcus Webb received the latest intelligence packet through Elena's hidden network. The information was incredible. Complete schematics of Zephyrian power systems, security protocols for major installations, and most importantly, the locations of neural chip control centers. Marcus shared the data with his cell of 23 humans working in the mining complex. They had been preparing for this moment for months, secretly gathering supplies and modifying equipment. Now they had everything they needed to strike back. The power core is heavily shielded, Marcus explained to the group huddled in an abandoned mining tunnel. But the cooling system isn't. If we can get past the security sensors, we can introduce a resonance cascade that will overload the entire facility. What about the guards? Asked Sarah Kim, the cell's designated lookout. That's where Elena's virus comes in. At exactly 300 local time, it will trigger a false security alert in Sector 12. All the guards will rush there, giving us a 15-minute window to reach the core. Marcus looked around the group. These were teachers, engineers, doctors, and farmers who had never wanted to be soldiers. But the Zephyrians had given them no choice. Once we start this, there's no going back, he warned. They'll know we're organized, and they'll respond with overwhelming force. Good, said Dr. Patterson, a former pediatrician whose hands now shook with barely controlled rage. Let them see what happens when you hurt our children. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place in secret meetings on 17 different worlds. Elena's virus had created a coordinated resistance network, unlike anything the Zephyrian Empire had ever faced. On Earth, Captain Sarah Chen crouched in the ruins of Geneva, studying a holographic display that showed the Zephyrian command center. Her resistance cell had grown to over 300 humans, hidden in the underground tunnels beneath major cities. The intel from Elena is perfect, she told her lieutenants. Every guard rotation, every security system, every weak point. It's like having the enemy's battle plans. When do we move? Asked Colonel Harrison, her second in command. Sarah checked her chronometer. Simultaneous strikes across all worlds. 17 facilities, 17 power cores, all going down at the same time. They'll be so busy responding to emergencies that they won't be able to coordinate a counterattack. The plan was ambitious beyond anything humans had attempted before, but it was also their only chance. Rodriguez's death had shown them that the Zephyrians were planning to eliminate human consciousness entirely. This was their last opportunity to fight back. At exactly 300 coordinated universal time, the rebellion began. On Keth 7, Marcus's team moved through the mining complex like ghosts. Elena's virus had done its job perfectly, creating false alarms that drew the guards away from critical areas. Marcus reached the power core's cooling system and began installing the resonance device he had built from stolen components. The device was simple, but effective. It would cause the cooling fluid to vibrate at a specific frequency, creating stress fractures in the containment system. The Zephyrians' own safety protocols would then shut down the power core to prevent a catastrophic explosion. Marcus finished the installation just as the first Zephyrian guards returned from investigating the false alarm. He ducked into a maintenance shaft as metallic footsteps echoed through the corridors above. On Earth, Sarah Chen's team moved through the Geneva Command Center with military precision. The Zephyrians had converted the facility into their planetary headquarters. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had used human workers to maintain the lower levels. Sarah's people knew every corridor, every security system, every way in and out. They moved like water through cracks, reaching the power distribution center without triggering a single alarm. Charges set, reported Harrison as he attached Marcus's resonance device to the main power coupling. 60 seconds to activation. Sarah activated her communicator, broadcasting to all resistance cells. This is for James Rodriguez. This is for our children. This is for humanity. The devices activated simultaneously across 17 worlds. The effect was immediate and devastating. On Keth 7, Marcus watched through a maintenance grate as the power core began to shut down. Emergency lights flickered on as the facility's main systems went dark. Zephyrian technicians rushed between consoles, their calm demeanor replaced by confusion and alarm. Core temperature rising, one technician reported in the musical language of their species. Cooling system malfunction detected. Initiate emergency protocols, ordered the facility commander. Evacuate all non-essential personnel. But the evacuation procedures had been designed for single-point failures, not coordinated attacks. As reports flooded in from other facilities across the Empire, the Zephyrian command structure began to buckle under the strain. Elena watched the chaos unfold from her position on the Dominance. Zephyrian commanders shouted orders at each other, their usual calm replaced by panic as 17 critical facilities went dark simultaneously. "How is this possible?" demanded Fleet Admiral Corex, his metallic skin cycling through angry red colors. "These are primitive beings. They shouldn't be capable of coordinated action." Elena kept her expression carefully neutral, but inside she was celebrating. The Zephyrians' greatest weakness was their inability to understand human nature. They saw individual intelligence and assumed it meant individual action. They couldn't comprehend that humans were at their most dangerous when they worked together. "Sir," reported a Zephyrian intelligence officer, "we're detecting massive power failures across the 7th sector. All affected facilities are requesting immediate assistance. Dispatch repair fleets to all locations," Corex ordered. Maximum priority. But as the Zephyrian fleet scrambled to respond to the crisis, Elena's virus activated its final protocol. The accumulated intelligence it had gathered over months began broadcasting to every human within range of a Zephyrian communication array. Suddenly, human workers across the galaxy had access to security codes, facility blueprints, and tactical information. They knew which systems to sabotage, which guards to avoid, and most importantly, how to disable their neural compliance chips. The revolution that had started with 17 coordinated strikes began to spread like wildfire. Humans who had been passive slaves for 3 years suddenly had the knowledge and opportunity to fight back. Marcus emerged from his hiding place as the mining facility descended into chaos. Around him, other humans were removing their neural chips using the override codes Elena had provided. For the first time in 3 years, they were free to think and act without fear of punishment. "The transport ships," Marcus called to his team. "If we can capture one, we can evacuate the children from the processing centers." Sarah Chen's team had taken control of the Geneva Command Center, but their victory was short-lived. Zephyrian reinforcements were already en route to Earth and they would arrive within hours. "We've bought ourselves time," Sarah told her people. "Now we need to use it. Every human on every world needs to know that resistance is possible." Elena made her choice as Zephyrian security forces closed in on the communications hub. She had one final message to send, one that would reach every human in the galaxy. "This is Elena Webb speaking to all humans everywhere," she broadcast on all frequencies. "We are not servants. We are not slaves. We are human beings and we choose to be free." The fire had been lit. Now it would spread across the stars, consuming everything the Zephyrians had built on the backs of enslaved species. The revolution had begun, and there would be no stopping it. Fleet Admiral Corex stood on the bridge of the massive dreadnought Eternal Dominion, watching as his grand fleet prepared to end the human rebellion, once and for all. 200 of the Empire's most powerful warships hung in space around him, each one capable of destroying entire planets. "Admiral," reported his tactical officer, "all ships are in position. We have confirmed targeting solutions for 17 rebel worlds." Corex's metallic skin shifted to a satisfied gold color. The humans had surprised him with their coordinated attacks, but they had also revealed their locations. Now he would crush every center of resistance simultaneously, ending this embarrassing revolt. "The Council has authorized complete sterilization," Corex announced to his fleet commanders. "No human facility is to remain intact. No rebel is to survive. We will make an example that will be remembered for 1,000 generations." But hundreds of light years away, Elena Webb was putting the finishing touches on her own plan. The virus she had planted months ago had evolved far beyond its original programming. It had learned the structure of every Zephyrian system, mapped every connection in their vast network, and identified the one weakness that could bring down their entire empire. Elena sat in the captured communications hub on the Dominance, surrounded by the bodies of Zephyrian guards who had tried to stop her. Her neural chip lay shattered on the floor beside her, finally giving her complete freedom to think and plan. "Marcus, can you hear me?" she transmitted to her father on Keth 7. "I'm here," Marcus replied. His resistance cell had taken control of the entire mining facility, using the Zephyrians' own weapons against them. The resonance cascade worked perfectly. "We've got control of the power grid." "Good. Sarah, what's your status?" Captain Chen's voice crackled through the communicator from Earth. "Geneva is secure, but we've got incoming hostiles. Big ones. Looks like they're bringing the entire fleet." Elena smiled grimly. "That's exactly what we want. The more ships they bring, the bigger the explosion will be." For the past 3 months, Elena's virus had been doing more than just gathering intelligence. It had been subtly modifying the Zephyrian power distribution protocols, creating tiny changes that individually meant nothing but together formed a devastating trap. The Zephyrians' greatest strength was their interconnected technology. Every ship, every station, every facility was linked through their subspace communication network. Energy could be shared instantly across impossible distances, allowing damaged ships to draw power from the entire fleet. But Elena had turned that strength into a fatal weakness. "When I activate the virus, it will cause every power core in their network to resonate at the same frequency," Elena explained to the resistance leaders. "The feedback loop will build until their entire power grid becomes unstable." "How unstable?" Marcus asked. "Catastrophically unstable. Every Zephyrian ship and facility will overload simultaneously, but we only get one chance at this. If they detect what's happening before the cascade reaches critical mass, they can disconnect their network and save most of their fleet." Sarah Chen watched the approaching Zephyrian armada through her captured sensors. "How long do we need to hold them?" 15 minutes from activation to cascade failure." "Can you give me that much time?" "Against 200 dreadnoughts?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "Elena, they could glass every rebel world in 5 minutes. Then we better make sure they don't." Elena's hands moved across the Zephyrian control console, her fingers dancing through holographic displays that would have been incomprehensible to most humans. But Elena had spent 3 years learning to think like a Zephyrian, to understand their technology from the inside out. The virus was ready. Months of careful preparation had led to this moment. But as Elena prepared to activate the final protocol, alarms began screaming throughout the dominance. "All human slaves, report to processing stations immediately," announced the ship's commander over the intercom. "Resistance will be met with immediate termination." Elena ignored the warnings and activated her program. Across the galaxy, hidden subroutines that had been dormant for months suddenly came to life. In the depths of Zephyrian computer networks, artificial intelligences that had served the Empire for centuries began to rewrite their own programming. The effect was subtle at first. Power fluctuations that could have been attributed to normal maintenance. Communication delays that seemed like network congestion. Systems running slightly hotter than normal, but still within acceptable parameters. Admiral Corex was focused on the tactical display showing his target worlds when his engineering officer made the first report. "Sir, we're detecting minor power irregularities across the fleet. It's nothing serious, but the patterns are unusual." "Define unusual," Corex demanded. "The fluctuations are synchronized, sir. All ships are experiencing the same variations at exactly the same time." Corex's skin shifted to a worried orange. In 50 years of commanding Zephyrian fleets, he had never seen synchronized power fluctuations. Their ships were designed to operate independently, sharing resources only when necessary. "Run a full diagnostic of the power distribution network," he ordered. But the diagnostic systems were already compromised. Elena's virus had spread through every level of Zephyrian technology, rewriting safety protocols and overriding control systems. The diagnostic reported normal operations even as the power cores began to resonate with increasing violence. On Earth, Sarah Chen's desperate defense was buying Elena the time she needed. Human fighters armed with captured Zephyrian weapons harassed the massive fleet as it approached. They couldn't hope to stop the dreadnoughts, but they could slow them down. "Sarah, how much time do I have left?" Elena asked through the communicator. "Maybe 5 minutes before they reach firing range," Sarah replied. Her voice strained as she piloted a stolen fighter through a storm of enemy fire. Elena checked her program's progress. The power cascade was building, but slowly. The Zephyrians had built multiple safeguards into their systems, and Elena's virus had to overcome each one carefully to avoid detection. Marcus, I need you to manually overload the power core on Keth 7, she ordered. Elena, that will kill everyone in the facility, Marcus protested. The Zephyrians evacuated their people when you took control. It's only humans left, and we all knew this was a suicide mission. One more power core failure might push the cascade over the threshold. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I understand. Give me 2 minutes. Elena watched her father's vital signs through the resistance network as he made his way to the power core. Marcus Webb had always been a man who put others before himself. Now he was about to make the ultimate sacrifice to free humanity. The explosion on Keth 7 was visible from orbit. The mining facility's power core overloaded in a blaze of energy that lit up the planet's night sky. But more importantly, the feedback pulse from the destroyed core rippled through the Zephyrian network like a shockwave. Elena watched as her virus detected the pulse and used it to trigger cascading failures throughout the Empire. Power cores that had been running hot for months suddenly spiked beyond critical levels. Safety systems that had been subtly modified failed to respond. Cooling systems shut down just as reactors reached dangerous temperatures. Admiral Corex realized what was happening when his own ship's power core began to scream warnings that couldn't be ignored. Emergency shutdown of all networked systems, he ordered. Disconnect from the communication grid immediately. But it was too late. The cascade had reached critical mass, and Elena's virus had anticipated their response. The shutdown commands were intercepted and redirected. Instead of disconnecting from the network, the ships began drawing more power from each other, accelerating the feedback loop. Sir, core temperature approaching critical, his engineering officer shouted. We need to evacuate immediately. Corex stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Across his fleet, 200 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy were simultaneously overloading. The impossible had happened. A species they considered barely above animals had outsmarted the greatest military force in known space. How? He whispered. How did they do this? Elena heard his question through the captured communication system and decided to answer it. You want to know how we did this? Elena's voice echoed through the bridge of the Eternal Dominion. You called us servants, but you never bothered to learn what we were capable of. You saw our technology and assumed we were primitive. You saw our emotions and thought we were weak. The power cores throughout the Zephyrian fleet were reaching critical mass. Ships began to explode, their death throes creating even more feedback in the network. But you made one mistake, Elena continued. You gave us access to your technology, and humans have a gift for understanding how things work. We don't just use tools. We improve them, we adapt them, we turn them into weapons when we have to. Admiral Corex watched his flagship's power core finally surrender to the cascade failure. The Eternal Dominion, pride of the Zephyrian fleet, began to tear itself apart from the inside. You called us servants, Elena said as the explosion spread across the Grand Fleet. But servants learn their master's weaknesses, and now your servants have turned your armies into ashes. The cascade spread beyond the fleet to every Zephyrian facility connected to the network.